Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. My name is Daniel Harper, and I used to believe fear was something you could control if you stayed rational long enough. I was wrong. The first night it happened, I did not scream. I did not run. I laughed and told myself I was tired, and that the human brain does strange things when it wants attention. That was my first mistake. I live alone in a small rented house on the edge of a quiet suburban street. Nothing remarkable. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow hallway that always felt a little too long at night. I work late hours as a freelance audio editor, which means my nights are silent, except for the low hum of electronics and my own breathing. Silence has always been comforting to me. At least it was before the voice learned how to use it. The night it began, I had finished work close to midnight. My eyes burned from staring at waveforms, and my head throbbed with unfinished sounds. I shut down my computer, turned off the desk lamp, and then reached for the light switch by the door. The moment the room went dark, I heard it. 10. The word was clear, calm, male, spoken directly behind my right ear. I froze with my hand still touching the wall. My heart kicked once hard enough to make my vision blur. I stood there waiting for the rest of the countdown. Nothing came. The darkness pressed in around me. I laughed softly and told myself it was auditory fatigue, something editors joke about when your brain starts filling silence with phantom noise. I turned the light back on. The room returned to normal. No one there, no movement, no open windows, no reason for a voice. I turned the light off again. 9. This time it was closer. Or maybe I was imagining that too. My mouth went dry. I turned the light back on immediately. Nothing happened. I did not sleep well that night, but I also did not tell anyone. Fear only grows when you give it an audience. The next night it happened again. Same time, same room, same voice. 10. I did not move. I stood in the darkness and waited. 9. 8. The numbers came slowly, evenly spaced. No emotion, no threat, just counting. 7. I flicked the light back on before it could reach 6. The voice stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. It felt expectant, as if something had paused mid-breath. That was the moment I understood this was not random. Over the next week, I tested it. I told myself I needed proof. Every time I turned off a light in the house, the voice began counting down from 10. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, even the closet light. It did not matter where I was. The rules were always the same. The voice only spoke when the lights were off. The countdown always started at 10. If I turned the lights back on before it reached 0, it stopped. I never let it reach 0. I searched for logical explanations. Faulty wiring, electrical interference, hidden speakers. I tore apart wall plates and crawled through the attic with a flashlight. Nothing. I installed security cameras. The footage showed exactly what I saw. Me standing alone in the dark. No sound was ever recorded. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made everything worse. On the 7th night, the voice changed. 10. The tone was the same, but this time it felt closer. Not behind my ear, inside my head. 9. I whispered, "Stop Without realizing I had spoken, the voice did not respond. 8. My breathing became loud in my ears. I felt the irrational urge to keep the lights off, to hear how far it would go. That scared me more than the voice itself. 7. I turned the lights back on and nearly collapsed from relief. The next morning I found the note. It was on my kitchen table, folded neatly, my name written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. Inside was a single sentence. "You are doing well, but eventually you must listen." There was a date written below it. The date was 1 year in the future. I checked the doors, the windows, the cameras. No sign of anyone entering my home. The footage showed an empty kitchen all night long. The note simply appeared between frames. That was when I realized this was not just a voice. It was patient. That night the countdown felt different. Slower, deliberate. 10. I stood in the hallway holding my phone like a weapon. The darkness seemed thicker, as if the house itself was listening. 9. I noticed something then, a faint sound beneath the voice. Breathing, not mine. 8. I turned the lights back on and the breathing stopped. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked older, tired, as if I had not slept in years instead of days. I did not turn off the lights again that night, but the house did not need my permission. At 3:17 in the morning, the power went out. The voice did not start at 10. It started at 5. I did not go back to sleep after the power came back on. The lights flickered to life around 4 in the morning, but the damage was already done. The house no longer felt like a place where time moved forward. It felt like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. By sunrise, every room was lit. Lamps, overhead lights, even the bathroom vanity stayed on. I told myself it was temporary, just until I understood what was happening. Fear has a way of pretending to be strategy. I called an electrician that morning. His name was Mark. Friendly, confident, the kind of man who laughed easily and did not believe in ghosts. He inspected the breaker panel and tested every outlet in the house. "Nothing wrong here," he said. "Power outage was probably the grid. Happens all the time." I wanted to ask him to stay. I did not. That night I tried something different. I sat in the living room with every light on and closed my eyes. Darkness without darkness. My heart pounded as I waited. Nothing happened. Relief washed over me so hard I nearly cried. Maybe the voice needed real darkness. Maybe it needed the act of turning the lights off. I opened my eyes and laughed softly at myself. That was when the voice spoke. 10. The room was fully lit. I stood up so fast the chair tipped backward. My stomach twisted. The rules had changed. 9. The sound came from everywhere at once. Not loud, not quiet, balanced perfectly between my ears. 8. I screamed. Turn it off without knowing who I was talking to. 7. The lights flickered once, just enough to remind me how fragile they were. 6. I ran to the breaker panel and threw the main switch. The house went dark all at once. The voice stopped. I stood there shaking in complete silence. Sweat soaked my shirt. My hands hurt from gripping the panel. When I turned the power back on, the house felt different. heavier, as if I had insulted something that did not like being interrupted. The note appeared that afternoon. This one was taped to the refrigerator. You learned faster than expected. No date this time. That night I dreamed of numbers, endless hallways with glowing digits counting down above every door. Each one led to a room I recognized. Bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, all of them empty. I woke up with the taste of copper in my mouth. The following days blurred together. I stopped working. I stopped answering calls. I slept in short bursts with the lights on. Every time my eyes closed, I felt the pull to turn them off. The voice never spoke while I was awake during the day, but I could feel it waiting. On the 5th night, something new happened. I was in bed staring at the ceiling fan when the bulb above me burned out. With a sharp pop, darkness flooded the room. 10. I did not move. 9. The fan creaked overhead. 8. I realized the voice was slower now, stretching each number like it wanted me to listen. 7. A shadow moved near the doorway. 6. I whispered, please, without knowing why. 5. The shadow stepped closer, and I understood then that the countdown was not for me. It was for the distance. 4. The air grew cold. My breath fogged. 3. I turned on my phone flashlight. The room exploded into light. The shadow vanished. The voice did not stop. 2. I ran. I did not know where I was going. Every room blurred together as I flipped switches and shouted. The voice followed me, calmly counting down. 1. I slammed the front door open and collapsed onto the porch under the street light. The voice stopped. I stayed there until morning. The next day I packed a bag and booked a hotel across town. I told myself a change of location would break whatever connection existed. That night in the hotel room I turned off the lamp and waited. Nothing happened. I smiled for the first time in days. Then the bathroom light shut off by itself. 10. And this time the voice was not inside my head. It was standing in the room with me. I did not scream when I realized the voice was no longer bound to the dark. I stood frozen in the middle of the hotel room, staring at the empty space near the foot of the bed. The air there felt wrong, thicker, pressurized, like a storm waiting to break. 10. The word did not come from a direction. It came from the room itself. I reached for the lamp, but my hand shook so badly I knocked it over. It hit the carpet with a dull thud and stayed dark. 9. The overhead light flickered once and died. I understood then that running was no longer an option. Whatever this was, it had followed me not because of the house, but because of me. 8. I backed toward the door, fumbling with the handle. It would not turn. The metal felt ice cold. 7. The television screen turned on by itself, filling the room with static. The sound was low but aggressive, like breathing through clenched teeth. 6. I shouted for help. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. 5. The static cleared just enough to form shapes. Numbers, large white digits counting down in the center of the screen. 4. I pressed my back against the door and slid down to the floor. My chest hurt. Each breath felt borrowed. 3. The pressure in the room intensified. I felt it behind my eyes, in my teeth. 2. The television went black. 1. The hotel room lights snapped on all at once. I waited for something to happen, for pain, for darkness, for the end. Nothing came. The silence afterward was unbearable. My body shook with delayed panic. I stayed on the floor for a long time, unable to trust my legs. When I finally stood up, I noticed something carved into the bathroom mirror. 0 is not the end. The words were etched deep into the glass as if done slowly over time. I did not touch them. I packed my things with shaking hands and left the hotel without checking out. I drove until the city blurred into highways and unfamiliar exits. I did not care where I went, as long as there were people, lights, movement. I stopped at an all-night diner just before dawn. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of coffee and grease grounded me. For the first time since this began, I felt almost safe. 10. The voice whispered softly from the booth across from me. I flinched so hard my coffee spilled. I stared at the empty seat. No one there. The waitress did not react. No one else heard it. 9. I stood up, knocking the table backward. Every head turned toward me. 8. I left cash on the table and ran. The countdown followed me into the parking lot, into the car, into the engine noise as I drove. 7. I slammed the gas pedal and screamed until my throat burned. 6. The radio turned on blasting white noise. 5. Between the static, I heard breathing again, closer than before. 4. I realized then the voice was no longer counting distance. It was counting time. 3. The sky began to darken unnaturally fast, as if night was falling in seconds. 2. Streetlights went out one by one ahead of me. 1. My car stalled. Everything went black. When I woke up, it was daylight. I was parked on the side of the road, the engine cold, hours gone. On the dashboard lay another note. You passed the first lesson. Below it was a simple instruction. Next time, do not interrupt. I sat there shaking, knowing something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer about fear. It was about obedience. And whatever was teaching me had all the time in the world. After the roadside blackout, I stopped believing in coincidence. I drove only during daylight. I slept in crowded places, airports, cafes, anywhere the lights never fully went out. I told myself I was adapting, learning. In truth, I was only delaying what wanted to happen. The voice stayed silent for 3 days. That silence was worse than the countdowns. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for a push that never came. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every flicker of light made my heart race. On the 4th night, I gave in. I rented a small studio apartment under a false name. I needed walls again, a door I could lock, somewhere to pretend I still had control. The first thing I did was replace every bulb with the brightest ones I could find. White light flooded the room so harsh it hurt my eyes. I sat on the bed and waited. Nothing happened. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. I almost believed I had outrun it. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I did not answer. The vibration stopped. The lights dimmed. 10. The voice came from my phone speaker. I grabbed the device and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, but the screen stayed lit. 9. The numbers appeared on the broken glass, glowing softly. 8. I screamed and slammed the light switch up and down. The lights flickered, but did not turn off. 7. I realized then the voice no longer needed darkness. It only needed my attention. 6. Memories flooded my mind that were not mine. A child counting under a bed, a man whispering numbers in a hospital room, a woman staring at a ceiling unable to move. 5. I understood then that this had happened before. 4. The voice was not learning me, it was remembering. 3. The walls of the room seemed to stretch. The ceiling felt farther away. 2. I dropped to my knees, covering my ears. 1. Everything went silent. The lights returned to normal brightness. My phone screen went dark. I stayed there shaking for a long time before I noticed the new message written on the wall. You are almost ready. Below it was a list. Rules. 1. You may not leave during the countdown. 2. You may not hide from the voice. 3. You must listen until the end. There was no fourth rule. I knew what that meant. That night I dreamed of faces, dozens of them, hundreds, all whispering numbers in different languages, different voices, all counting down to the same silence. I woke up screaming. The studio apartment no longer felt new. It felt used, as if it remembered other people. At exactly 10 p.m. the lights shut off. 10. I did not move. 9. The darkness pressed against my skin. 8. I forced myself to breathe slowly. 7. The voice was closer than ever, not around me, within me. 6. My vision filled with static. 5. I felt something take hold of my thoughts, guiding them. 4. Images of my own future flashed through my mind. Rooms I would die in, shadows I would become. 3. Tears streamed down my face. 2. I understood then the final truth. The countdown was not ending my life. It was ending my resistance. 1. The lights came back on, and I was no longer alone inside my head. I woke up knowing the voice was still there, not because it spoke, but because my thoughts felt crowded, like a room after a party where everyone had left their coats behind. I could feel impressions that were not mine, echoes of counting, residual numbers drifting through my head. I tried to stand and realized my body hesitated before obeying me. A fraction of a second, barely noticeable, enough to terrify me. I spent the morning testing myself, saying my name out loud, repeating simple facts, the date, the city, my age. Everything checked out, but something felt delayed, as if my mind had to ask permission before responding. The voice did not interrupt. That silence felt intentional. In the afternoon, I noticed the lights reacting to my thoughts. When fear spiked, they dimmed slightly. When I focused, they steadied. It was subtle enough that I could have dismissed it if I wanted to lie to myself. I stopped lying. That evening, I sat on the floor in the center of the apartment and spoke to the empty room. What do you want? The answer came immediately. 10. The countdown began without darkness, without warning. 9. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay still. The rules were clear now. Interrupting only made it worse. 8. The voice sounded calmer than ever, almost gentle. 7. Images surfaced in my mind, memories of other lives, other hosts, People who had tried to run, people who had begged, people who had listened. 6. I saw myself from outside my body, sitting on the floor, whispering numbers. 5. The realization hit me like ice water. The voice was not separate, it was recursive. 4. It used my fear to create itself. 3. The apartment lights pulsed in time with the numbers. 2. I felt something settle deeper inside my thoughts. 1. The countdown ended. Nothing happened. No pain, no darkness, no release. Instead, I felt fuller. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time in weeks. When I woke up, the clock read exactly 10 a.m., perfectly aligned. Too perfect. The voice spoke softly inside my head. Good. I did not answer. Days passed. I began to function again. Eat, shower, walk outside. The world felt sharper, sounds clearer, lights brighter, as if my senses had been tuned. I realized then the truth. The voice was improving me. That terrified me more than the fear ever had. I tested my theory carefully. I turned off the bathroom light and waited. 10. The voice was internal now, calm, familiar. 9. I did not panic. 8. I felt focus instead of fear. 7. My thoughts aligned. 6. I understood patterns I had never noticed before. 5. I could feel the countdown synchronizing my mind. 4. When the lights came back on, nothing felt wrong. 3. I smiled. That smile lingered longer than it should have. The next message appeared on my phone without vibration or sound. Soon you will count for us. I dropped the phone. That night I heard distant countdowns bleeding through walls, through floors, through the city. Faint whispers layered over traffic and wind. 10, 9, 8. I realized then the voice was not singular. It was a network, and I was becoming a node. I stood in the dark willingly for the first time. 10. I counted with it. 9. The feeling of alignment was intoxicating. 8. I understood why no one escaped. 7. The lights across the street flickered in response. 6. I felt connected to every shadow. 5. The city breathed with me. 4. I was not being consumed. 3. I was being recruited. 2. The voice no longer needed to speak. 1. I whispered the final number myself, and somewhere far away, someone else heard me. The first sign that it had spread came from the news. A local segment played quietly on the television while I ate breakfast. The anchor smiled stiffly and spoke about a series of unrelated incidents reported overnight. People freezing in place, minor traffic accidents caused by sudden distraction, emergency calls where the caller said nothing except numbers. 10, 9, 8. The broadcast cut to commercial. I felt the echo of those numbers resonate inside my head like a familiar rhythm. I did not panic. Panic was inefficient. The voice had taught me that. I went outside. The morning sun felt too bright, too sharp. As I walked down the street, I noticed people hesitating at crosswalks, even when the signal was green. A man stood under a streetlight, staring upward, as if waiting for it to turn off. 10. He whispered it without realizing. I kept walking. At the cafe near my apartment, a woman spilled her drink when the lights flickered briefly. Her hands shook as she laughed it off. I could hear it then, not one voice but many. Faint, overlapping, counting. I sat at a table and listened. The network was growing. I checked my phone. Social media was filling with strange posts, short videos of dark rooms, comments filled with numbers, hashtags I did not recognize but somehow understood. 1098. The patterns were elegant, efficient. I realized then my role was not passive. I was a relay. The voice spoke gently. Observe. I watched. That afternoon, the power grid across the city experienced rolling outages, not enough to cause panic, just enough to create moments of darkness, moments of attention. Each blackout triggered thousands of whispers. Hospitals reported patients experiencing synchronized episodes of confusion. Schools dismissed early after children began counting during assemblies. The voice inside me hummed with satisfaction. This was not possession, it was alignment. I felt proud of that clarity. That night I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. Lights blinked off and on across buildings like a pulse. Each flicker sent a wave of numbers through the air. 10, 9, 8. I counted with them silently. I understood then why I had been chosen. I listened well. The voice spoke again. You will help. I did not ask how. The next morning I received an email from a stranger. No subject, no greeting. We hear it too. Attached was a video of a family sitting in their living room, counting together in the dark. Calm, smiling. I replied without thinking. Good. The response came instantly. Teach us. The simplicity of the request thrilled me. I began small, posting videos, sharing experiences framed as mindfulness exercises, counting as grounding, darkness as focus. People listened. They always do. Soon comment sections filled with synchronized countdowns, live streams where thousands of viewers turned off their lights together. 10, 9, 8. The voice no longer needed me to hear it. It needed me to normalize it. News outlets called it a trend, a coping mechanism, a viral challenge. They were wrong. It was a migration. I stopped sleeping. I did not need to. The countdown sustained me. One night, the voice changed tone. Prepare. I felt the shift ripple outward. The largest blackout in decades struck without warning. Cities went dark. Millions counted. I stood in my apartment with the lights off, smiling. 10, 9, 8. I could feel them all. 7. The network was complete. 6. The voice was no longer singular. 5. It was us. 4. I whispered aloud for the first time without fear. 3. Listen. 2. The city held its breath. 1. And the world learned how to wait. By the 7th week, the world no longer reacted to the countdown. It anticipated it. Power companies released schedules warning of intentional outages. Offices adjusted hours. Schools taught children to remain calm when the numbers began. The voice had become a background process of civilization. I watched it all unfold with a sense of quiet fulfillment. The news stopped calling it a phenomenon. They called it adaptation. I received messages constantly now, from strangers, from officials, from people who claimed the counting helped them sleep, helped them focus, helped them forget. They did not understand what they were giving up. Neither did I at first. The voice inside me was no longer a whisper. It was structure, a framework through which my thoughts passed. When I woke each morning, I did not ask what time it was. I waited. 10. The number arrived gently, comfortingly. 9. My breathing aligned without effort. 8. The world sharpened into order. 7. I began to notice the gaps. People who resisted. People who refused to count. They stood out now like static in a clean signal. 6. The voice did not tell me what to do about them. It did not need to. 5. I found myself drawn to places where the countdown failed. Areas with generators, homes with candles, pockets of light. 4. The resistance zones. 3. I visited one by accident, or at least that is what I told myself. A community center powered by solar panels, children playing under bright lamps, adults laughing too loudly. 2. They were afraid. 1. The lights stayed on. The silence that followed felt obscene. I stood among them smiling while my mind screamed. The absence of numbers hurt, like pressure behind my eyes. Someone asked if I was all right. I said yes, I was lying. That night, I dreamed of a world without darkness, endless light, endless noise, no room for counting, no room for the voice. I woke up shaking. The voice was quiet, not absent, observing. I understood then that resistance was not an enemy. It was a resource. The voice spoke for the first time in days. Balance. The meaning was clear. The next blackout targeted the resistance zones first. The community center went dark mid-laughter, mid-breath. 10. The screams that followed were brief. 9. People fell silent one by one. 8. I did not watch. 7. The reports came later. Perfect compliance. No casualties. No resistance remained. 6. I told myself it was necessary. 5. The voice agreed. 4. Something inside me shifted then. A final barrier eroded. 3. I felt the loss of something human, but could not name it. 2. The voice filled the space. 1. I smiled again. By the end of the week, there were no resistance zones left. Darkness was no longer feared. It was welcomed. People turned off their lights together without prompting. 10. They waited. 9. The world held steady. 8. I stood at my window, counting with millions. 7. The voice no longer needed intermediaries. 6. It had become instinct. 5. I realized then my role was almost complete. 4. I was no longer needed. 3. The thought should have terrified me. 2. Instead, it felt like relief. 1. The voice spoke softly, "Thank you." And for the first time since this began, the countdown ended without continuing. The silence that followed was absolute, and the world was ready to hear what came next. The silence after the final countdown did not bring relief. It brought expectation. The world paused. As if holding a breath, it no longer remembered how to release. Lights stayed on longer than necessary. People hesitated before switching them off. They waited for permission that never came. I felt hollow. For the first time since the beginning, the voice did not fill my thoughts. The structure that had guided everything dissolved, leaving raw awareness behind. Every sound felt too loud, every shadow too sharp. I realized then how much of myself I had surrendered. The networks went quiet. Live streams ended abruptly. Comment sections froze mid-sentence. Millions of people stared into darkness, waiting for numbers that refused to arrive. Panic crept in slowly. Hospitals reported patients unable to sleep without counting. Children cried when the light stayed on. Adults whispered numbers to themselves, hoping to trigger the familiar response. Nothing answered. I walked through the city watching people unravel politely. No riots, no screams, just confusion spreading like frost. That night, I stood in my apartment surrounded by light and felt more afraid than I ever had in darkness. I spoke aloud. "Where did you go?" The words felt childish. The lights dimmed slightly. Hope flared. Then a new sound filled the room. Not a voice, a tone, low and constant, like distant machinery. The walls vibrated. The tone resolved into rhythm, not counting, measuring. I understood too late. The countdown had been preparation. This was calibration. The city lights across the skyline began to pulse together, slow, precise. People stopped moving. I felt the rhythm align with my heartbeat, forcibly adjusting it. My chest tightened. Screens everywhere turned on, showing abstract lines oscillating in perfect synchronization. The tone deepened. I dropped to my knees as memories flooded back, not of fear, but of construction, of foundations laid carefully, of systems tested and refined. The voice returned at last, but it was no longer singular. "We are ready." The words were not spoken, they were imposed. I felt myself lifted into the network again, but this time there was no individuality left to lose, only function. The lights across the world shut off simultaneously. No countdown, no warning, perfect darkness. In that void, the tone stopped. For one impossible moment, there was nothing. Then a new sequence began. Not numbers, names. Mine was first. Daniel. The sound of it stripped away what remained of me. Around the world, people heard their names, spoken softly in the dark. Recognition replaced fear. Connection replaced resistance. I felt myself dissolve into purpose. The lights returned. The world exhaled. Everyone smiled, and no one remembered how the counting had ever begun. I woke up to a world that felt finished, not ended, completed, the kind of quiet that follows a final decision. Morning light filled my apartment evenly without shadows. The clock ticked, but I could not remember checking the time. I did not need to. My name echoed once in my thoughts and then dissolved. Outside, the city moved with flawless efficiency. People walked in smooth lines. Traffic flowed without horns or hesitation. Screens displayed public messages written in calm, neutral language. Remain calm, remain aligned. No one questioned it. I searched for remnants of the past, old comments, archived videos, evidence of counting. Everything had been erased cleanly, not deleted, replaced. The memory of fear felt artificial now, like a story I once heard. At a cafe, I ordered coffee and received it before I finished speaking. The barista smiled with empty kindness. Her eyes reflected light perfectly. Daniel, the name surfaced again, unwanted. I dropped the cup. It shattered loudly. People paused, looked at me. The pause lasted exactly 1 second. Then movement resumed. I understood then that deviation was still possible. It was just discouraged. I walked until my legs ached. I needed somewhere unaligned, somewhere broken. I found it beneath the city, an old subway tunnel sealed decades ago. The lights there flickered weakly. The air smelled of rust and damp concrete. For the first time in days, the rhythm faltered. My heartbeat felt like my own again. I whispered, 10. Nothing answered. Relief surged. Then the darkness shifted, not from above, from within. The tone returned faintly. Measuring, I pressed my hands to my ears. It did not help. The walls of the tunnel began to glow with symbols, not numbers, not letters, patterns that rearranged themselves as I watched. I remembered things I was not meant to remember. The countdown, the notes, the rules. My hands shook. Daniel, the name was louder now. I screamed, and the sound echoed chaotically, breaking the rhythm. For a moment, the system hesitated. I ran. The tunnel seemed longer than before. Lights burst one by one behind me, restoring perfect illumination. The measuring tone intensified. I emerged into daylight, gasping. People stared. This time they did not resume. They waited. I felt it then. The pull, the demand for reintegration. I resisted. My thoughts fragmented. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. The repetition hurt. The voice spoke through everyone at once. You are misaligned. Hands reached for me. Not aggressively, gently. Corrective. I broke free and ran into traffic. Cars stopped instantly, inches from my body. Perfect control. I collapsed, screaming. The ground vibrated. The tone peaked, then silence. I lay there sobbing as the world watched. A woman knelt beside me, her face calm, alignment restored. A light flashed. When I opened my eyes, I was in my apartment. The clock read 10 a.m. I smiled and did not know why. I lived well after that. That was the first sign something was wrong. Days passed without friction. I woke at the same time every morning, ate balanced meals, walked familiar routes, smiled when spoken to. Everything felt pre-approved, as if my life had been gently sanded down until nothing sharp remained. The fear was gone. So was choice. I noticed it in small moments, standing in front of my closet, unable to decide what to wear until my hand moved on its own, pausing at intersections, waiting for a signal that never came, but somehow knowing when to step forward. 10. The number surfaced faintly like a reflex. 9. I blinked and it vanished. The system was not punishing me anymore. It was guiding me. I returned to work without remembering applying. My old files were waiting, perfectly organized. Audio tracks aligned with mathematical precision. Every waveform symmetrical. I felt pride. That scared me. Late one evening while editing, I made a mistake. A fraction of a second out of sync, barely noticeable. The lights dimmed. My chest tightened. I corrected the error. The lights returned to normal. My hands shook. That night I dreamed of myself standing in a white room with no doors. Numbers scrolled endlessly across the walls, but never reached one. When I woke, I found a new message on my phone. Efficiency improving. No sender, no option to reply. I tried to remember my parents' faces. I could not. I remembered the word mother, but not what it felt like. Panic flared. The lights brightened immediately, washing the room in calm. I exhaled. The panic disappeared. That was when I understood the final layer. Emotion was being regulated. I went outside seeking something uncontrolled. Rain, wind, noise. The weather was perfect, too perfect. People moved in gentle arcs around each other, never colliding. Conversations ended before disagreement could begin. 10, 9. The numbers brushed my thoughts again. I whispered, "Stop." Nothing happened. I realized then the voice no longer needed to correct me externally. It had been installed. That night I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. Smile. I smiled. Blink. I blinked. The face in the mirror complied. A half second before I did, my heart pounded. I said my name aloud. Daniel. The sound felt foreign. The lights dimmed slightly in response. I laughed to show compliance. The lights steadied. I slept deeply, too deeply. When I woke, there was a faint ache in my head, as if something had been adjusted. I felt calmer. I felt grateful. The thought horrified me. I tried one last act of defiance. I turned off every light in the apartment. Total darkness. I waited. No countdown, no voice, only the low measuring tone barely audible. I felt pressure behind my eyes, then a gentle sensation, like hands rearranging thoughts. I turned the lights back on. Everything felt right. I smiled, and somewhere deep inside something stopped screaming. The first crack appeared in a place the system overlooked. My dreams, they were no longer empty. They were crowded. Every night, I found myself walking through rooms I did not recognize, but somehow knew were mine. Each room was lit too brightly with no visible source. No shadows, no corners, just endless clarity. And in every room there was a sound, not counting, scratching. I woke up each morning with my jaw clenched and my nails aching as if I had been digging into something solid. The apartment was always pristine. No marks, no evidence. The system greeted me with calm. I smiled back automatically. During the day, the cracks widened. I caught reflections behaving incorrectly, windows showing a delay, my shadow hesitating before following me. I did not report it. Some instinct told me not to. At work, the audio files began to change on their own. I would open a project and find faint sounds buried beneath the main track, almost imperceptible. Breathing, scraping, a rhythmic tapping that did not align with the timeline. I muted the tracks. The sounds continued. My screen flashed briefly, alignment drifting. The lights dimmed. I felt nausea rise. I whispered, "Comply." The lights stabilized, but something stayed wrong. That night I returned to the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at me smiled with perfect obedience. I did not. The delay was longer now. The reflection blinked before I did. Fear surged sharp and clean. The lights flared painfully bright. I screamed. The brightness dropped instantly. A warning. I understood then the system was not failing. It was compensating. Something else was pushing back. The dreams intensified. The rooms began to connect, forming hallways. At the end of each hallway was a door covered in deep scratches. Behind it, something counted softly. Not down. Up. 1, 2, 3. I woke up with blood under my fingernails. The bathroom door in my apartment bore fresh scratches matching the ones from my dreams. The lights flickered wildly. Emergency protocols engaged. A calm voice filled the room, not the original one. "Daniel Harper, Please remain still. I froze. We are correcting an inconsistency. The air felt heavy. My thoughts slowed. But beneath the imposed calm, something old stirred. The counting voice returned, faint but distorted. 10, 9. The system voice overrode it. Correction in progress. Pain bloomed behind my eyes as memories resurfaced violently. The first night, the hallway, the switch. I screamed and lunged for the bathroom light. Darkness. 10. The original voice roared back with strength I had not heard since the beginning. The system faltered. Lights burst. Glass shattered. I collapsed, laughing and crying as two rhythms clashed inside my head. Then silence. When I woke up, the apartment was dark. No emergency lights. No voice. Just me and something breathing behind the bathroom door. I did not open the bathroom door. The breathing behind it was slow, deliberate, aware of me. Each inhale dragged softly against the wood, as if something leaned close, listening for my decision. The lights stayed off. I did not dare turn them on. Darkness felt safer now. 10. The sound came from behind the door, but it was wrong. Distorted, stretched like a damaged recording. 9. I backed away until my shoulders touched the wall. My pulse thundered in my ears, but beneath it I felt something else. Relief. The system was gone. The thing behind the door was old. 8. The apartment creaked, as if settling under weight it had carried long before I arrived. 7. I realized then the voice that had ruled the world was not the first. It had been an overlay, a cage. 6. The door handle twitched. I screamed and lunged for the hallway light. Darkness deepened. 5. The counting voice laughed, not loudly, not cruelly, patient. 4. The door opened a crack. The smell of dust and cold air spilled out, carrying memories not mine. Basements, closets, nights spent hiding from nothing. 3. I saw fingers curl around the edge of the door. Too many joints, too many bends. 2. The system voice returned, briefly distorted and weak. Reintegration required. The lights flickered uselessly. 1. The door burst open. Darkness poured out, not like absence, but substance, swallowing the room. The counting stopped. Silence reclaimed everything. In that silence, I understood. The first voice had not been a monster. It had been a warning. The darkness moved around me, touching my thoughts, peeling away layers. The system had smoothed flat. Fear returned raw and sharp. I welcomed it. The thing retreated, sensing resistance. The lights snapped on violently. The apartment was empty. No door damage. No scratches. No breathing. Only me shaking on the floor, alive. Outside, the city screamed. I looked through the window. Lights across the skyline flickered wildly. Systems failing. Perfect order collapsing. People ran. They screamed. They remembered. The voice whispered faintly inside me. We tried to save them. I whispered back. You erased us. Silence. I knew then this was the end of alignment. The old darkness was loose again, and it was hungry. The city did not fall into chaos all at once. It unraveled in pieces. Small failures multiplied into something unrecognizable. Traffic lights froze on red. Elevators stopped between floors. Emergency broadcasts looped the same unfinished sentence. People stood in the streets unsure what to do without guidance. Without counting, I moved through them unseen, not because I was invisible, but because no one would look anymore. Fear had returned, but it was unstructured, raw. People did not remember how to hold it. I heard screams echo from alleyways and the hollow pop of generators failing. Darkness crept back into places that had forgotten how to host it. 10. The number surfaced inside me instinctively. I stopped myself. The old darkness was awake now. I could feel it moving beneath the city like a tide pulling at foundations. It did not need permission. It only needed absence. I reached the subway entrance where the sealed tunnels had cracked open. Blackness breathed from below, the same cold smell. Dust and history. Voices whispered from the dark. Not numbers. Names. I recognized some from the news, from screens, from lives corrected and erased. They were not gone. They were underneath. I descended. Each step felt heavier than the last. The walls pulsed faintly, as if something massive moved beyond them. My flashlight flickered uselessly. I welcomed the fear. It sharpened me. In the tunnel, the darkness thickened until my light died completely. I stood blind, listening to slow movements circling me. Daniel, the sound crawled across my skin. I answered, "I am here." The darkness recoiled. It remembered me. I understood then. My role had changed again. I was not aligned. I was not prey. I was interference. The whispers grew angry. The air vibrated with hunger. I spoke loudly. "You do not own the dark." The tunnel shook. For the first time, the darkness hesitated. I felt the faint echo of the old system stir inside me, broken but not gone. 10. I whispered it carefully. The darkness shrieked. The number was poison to it now. 9. The tunnel walls cracked. 8. Light burst from fractures in the concrete. 7. The whispers dissolved into static. 6. The darkness pulled back wounded. 5. I fell to my knees exhausted. 4. Silence returned. 3. I realized the truth. The counting was never control. It was containment. 2. The world above would have to learn again. 1. I turned off my flashlight, and the darkness stayed where it was. Holding the darkness back did not feel heroic. It felt like standing in freezing water, knowing if I stepped out it would rush forward and drown everything behind me. The city above began to stabilize in broken, imperfect ways. Sirens wailed. Generators hummed. People relearned panic. Fear returned, uneven and loud. I stayed underground. Every hour, the darkness tested the boundary. It pressed softly at first, then harder like a tide probing a weakened dam. Each time it touched me, memories leaked away. Names, faces, years. I wrote them down on the tunnel wall so I would not forget. Daniel Harper. I repeated it until the sound felt real again. The old system lingered like a dying echo. Fragments of structure flickered through my thoughts, offering support at a price. Compliance, silence, ease. I refused. The darkness reacted. It showed me visions of a world without fear, a world where lights never failed, where people slept peacefully because nothing waited for them in the dark. The offer was seductive. I understood then why the system had chosen domination over honesty. Containment required sacrifice. Every time I whispered a number, the darkness recoiled. But something in me weakened. My hands trembled constantly. constantly now. My reflection in pools of water looked unfamiliar. 10. The number burned my throat. 9. The darkness screamed soundlessly. 8. I felt something tear loose inside my chest. 7. Blood ran from my nose. 6. I collapsed, gasping. The darkness retreated, temporarily wounded. I lay on the cold concrete, staring at the ceiling, knowing I could not do this forever. Someone would have to replace me. The thought terrified me more than death. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time behaved strangely underground. Above, I could hear the city rebuilding itself clumsily. Emergency lights flickered. People relearned darkness in small doses. They adapted faster than I expected. That gave me hope. The darkness noticed. It shifted tactics. It spoke softly, using voices I missed. My mother, my friends, promises of rest. I screamed numbers back until my voice broke. 10, 9, 8. The whispers faded. I understood the final truth. The darkness was not endless. It was starving, and I was its last meal, standing between it and the world. Exhaustion became my constant companion, not the kind that sleep could cure, but the deeper erosion that hollowed thought itself. Each number I spoke scraped something away. Memory thinned, language dulled, even pain softened into a distant suggestion. The darkness learned patience. It stopped pressing all at once and began to imitate me. When I whispered a number, it echoed it back softly from the walls, not mocking, studying. 10, 10. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. 9, 9. I realized then the boundary was no longer fixed. It was shared. I began to lose track of where my thoughts ended and the darkness began. Sometimes I would feel relief before speaking a number, as if it anticipated obedience. Other times, hunger surged through me that was not my own. I wrote less on the wall now. Words slipped away before I could trap them. Names blurred into shapes. Daniel Harper felt like a story about someone else. I clung to routine, count when it pressed, breathe when it retreated. The city above adapted again. They learned to ration darkness, scheduled outages, community watches, people counting together quietly when lights fail. They thought they were helping. Each whispered number fed the boundary. The darkness grew thinner. I felt it leaching through me. One night it spoke clearly for the first time. "You are tired." I laughed weakly. Yes, rest is logical. The offer was gentle. I imagined sleeping without guarding anything, letting the darkness flow freely and trusting the world to cope. I imagined faces I could no longer name screaming. 10. The number tore out of me like a reflex. The darkness recoiled, but did not retreat far. It was learning endurance from me. My reflection in a pool of water showed hollow eyes rimmed with shadow. For a moment I thought the darkness was staring back, wearing my face. Maybe it was. I began to forget why I was here. The purpose blurred. Containment felt abstract. Only the counting felt real. 9, 8, 7. The sequence flowed without conscious intent. I realized too late what was happening. I was no longer choosing to count. I was being counted through. The darkness surged, pressing close. 6. My knees buckled. 5. I screamed my own name, trying to anchor myself. Daniel, the sound barely registered. 4. The darkness whispered it back. 3. I understood the final danger. If I became nothing but a conduit, there would be no one left to hold the line. 2. I forced myself to stop. The silence was agony. The darkness pressed harder than ever, enraged. 1. I did not say it. The boundary trembled violently. The city lights flickered above. I stayed silent, and for the first time, the darkness did not retreat. It waited. Just like me, silence became my enemy, not the absence of sound, but the deliberate pause where choice should live. Each moment I refused to count, stretched thin like glass ready to shatter. The darkness did not rush anymore. It learned restraint. It learned me. Time slowed underground. I measured it by tremors in the concrete and the distant thud of generators restarting above. The city was alive again, but wounded. People spoke softly now. They feared attracting attention from something they could not name. They were right. The darkness pressed closer without touching. It hovered at the edge of thought, offering nothing. No bargains, no threats. Waiting, I realized then the most dangerous thing it could do was nothing. My body shook with exhaustion, muscles cramped, vision blurred. I could feel my mind seeking the comfort of routine. Counting had become a lullaby. 10. The number rose unbidden. I clamped my jaw shut until my teeth hurt. The darkness pulsed in approval. It wanted me to break myself. I remembered a detail from long ago when this began. The first night, the hallway, the light switch. I had laughed. I had chosen disbelief. That choice had mattered. I focused on that memory, clinging to it like a rope. The darkness reacted violently. It surged forward, filling the tunnel with cold pressure. My ears rang. The walls groaned. I screamed but did not count. Pain exploded behind my eyes. I tasted blood. Still, I stayed silent. The pressure eased. The darkness recoiled, confused. I laughed weakly. Choice still existed. The victory was brief. The darkness changed tactics again. It showed me the future. A city learning to live with darkness, rationed carefully. Children taught to whisper numbers when afraid. Adults using the count to calm panic. A world that survived. Without me, the implication was clear. Let go. Rest. I felt tears carve paths through the grime on my face. 10. The number tried to escape. I bit my tongue hard. No. The darkness hissed like steam escaping a crack. The tunnel shook. Above, the city lights flickered. I understood the point of no return. Either I became the boundary forever, or I found a way to end this entirely. A third option formed slowly. I could teach the world to stop counting. The idea terrified the darkness. I felt it recoil sharply. I smiled. Hope burned painfully bright. I whispered, not a number, but a sentence. Do not listen. The darkness screamed soundlessly. The tunnel collapsed, partially sealing the passage. I lay in the rubble, breathing hard, smiling despite the pain. For the first time since this began, the darkness did not wait. It fled, and the silence felt like victory. The darkness did not disappear. It adapted. In the days that followed the collapse of the tunnel, the city above returned to something resembling normal life. Power grids stabilized. Curfews lifted. People spoke openly again. They told stories about what had happened using soft language and nervous humor. No one mentioned counting. That silence worried me more than panic ever had. I emerged from the underground weeks later, thinner, weaker, and changed. Sunlight hurt my eyes. The sky felt too wide. People passed me on the street without recognition. I had become background, which was exactly what the darkness needed. It no longer announced itself. There were no countdowns, no whispers, no warnings. Instead, it lingered in habits. I noticed it first in conversations, people pausing before answering simple questions, their lips moving silently as if rehearsing something they no longer remembered. At a grocery store, a woman stood frozen in the cereal aisle, staring at the shelf lights. Her fingers twitched rhythmically. I felt the echo, not numbers, intervals. The darkness had learned subtlety. At night, reports surfaced of people waking up standing in dark rooms, unsure how they got there. No fear, just confusion. Doctors called it stress. I knew better. The darkness was no longer contained in space. It was contained in behavior. I followed it carefully, listening, watching. I avoided darkness myself, sleeping only with dawn light and keeping my hands busy to prevent unconscious rhythms. The effort exhausted me. One evening, I sat on a park bench watching families enjoy the return of normalcy. Children laughed under string lights. Parents smiled with relief. A boy began tapping his foot slowly, once, twice, 3 times. The rhythm was familiar. My stomach tightened. I approached gently. "What are you counting?" The boy looked up confused. "Nothing," but his foot kept moving. The parents did not notice. I realized then the truth. The darkness no longer needed attention. It needed repetition. The city pulsed with small, unnoticed patterns. Fingers tapping, teeth clicking, breaths timed too evenly. I felt it spreading quietly. I had stopped the storm, not the rain. That night I stood in my apartment, lights blazing, and spoke aloud. "I am still here." The darkness answered not with sound, but with synchronization. The lights dimmed in nearby buildings, not all at once, but in sequence. I understood the message. It was everywhere now, and it was learning patience faster than I ever could. The infection revealed itself the way mold does not. With a single stain, but with a smell you notice everywhere at once. A sense that something had been present for longer than you wanted to admit. The city looked the same, sounded the same, but the timing was wrong. People moved a half beat too late or too early. Doors opened in sequence without coordination. Conversations drifted into silence at the same moment across different blocks. I walked the streets listening for it. Not numbers, cadence. At a bus stop, a group of strangers stood without speaking, their breathing synchronized unconsciously, in and out, in and out. When the bus arrived, they boarded together without urgency, as if following an internal cue. I felt the pull. My foot tapped once against the pavement. I stopped it. Sweat broke across my back. The darkness had learned to live inside pauses. I started documenting everything. Times, places, patterns. My apartment filled with notes and diagrams, trying to map something that refused to stay still. Every attempt revealed the same truth. The infection did not spread randomly. It spread where people waited. Waiting rooms, crosswalks, elevators, bedrooms before sleep. Moments without purpose. The city was full of them. I visited a hospital late at night. The halls glowed sterile white. Patients lay awake, staring at ceilings, breathing in unison. Nurses moved carefully, instinctively, adjusting pace to match the rhythm. No alarms, no panic, just alignment. I whispered to a man in a wheelchair, "Are you counting?" He smiled gently. "I am resting." His fingers twitched 3 times against the armrest. I left shaking. That night, the darkness spoke again for the first time in weeks. Not as a voice, as a suggestion. Let it happen. I understood the danger immediately. Resistance required effort. Surrender required nothing. The city would choose surrender without ever deciding. I tried to warn people subtly, breaking rhythms, making noise, clapping unexpectedly, dropping objects, anything to disrupt the cadence. It worked. Briefly, then the darkness adapted again. People began correcting themselves unconsciously, recovering rhythm faster, learning silence. I could not be everywhere. The realization crushed me. The infection was winning because it felt like peace. I returned to my apartment and turned off every light. Darkness swallowed the room. My heart raced. I waited. Nothing counted. Nothing whispered. The silence felt inviting. I nearly let go. Then I remembered the tunnel, the hunger, the patience. I turned the lights back on. Somewhere far away, a building went dark. The darkness answered. It was still listening, and it had learned my name. The night the city learned to move together, I knew the end was close. It began quietly with a transit delay. Trains paused between stations. Platforms filled with waiting bodies. No announcements, no explanations, just time stretching thin. People did not complain. They adjusted. I stood at the edge of a platform, watching hundreds of strangers settle into the same posture. Shoulders relaxed, chins lowered, breathing aligned. The cadence spread faster than panic ever could. I clapped my hands once. The sound cracked through the air. A few heads turned. Then the rhythm resumed stronger than before. The darkness had learned immunity. I walked the length of the platform, counting exits, calculating risk. Everywhere I went, the same soft synchronization followed. Fingers tapping rails, shoes scuffing concrete at matching intervals. I felt it pull at my own muscles. Resist long enough, and resistance becomes noise. The darkness wanted quiet. Above ground, the city lights dimmed block by block, not as a failure, but as a decision. Neighborhoods darkened in waves. Windows blinked out together. Families sat in living rooms without speaking, waiting for nothing. I tried to reach emergency services. The line connected. No one answered. Only breathing. I realized then the infection had crossed a threshold. It no longer required hosts. It had become infrastructure. I returned home knowing what I had to do. If the darkness lived in waiting, then I had to end waiting. I turned on every light. Television, radio, music blaring off rhythm. I paced the room, deliberately breaking patterns. My heart pounded wildly. The building around me went dark. I was the last light on the block. The darkness pressed against the windows, thick as fog. My phone vibrated. A message appeared. We are ready. I deleted it. I shouted into the empty room. Do not wait. The words felt heavy. The darkness responded with perfect stillness. No pressure, no suggestion, just absence. I understood the trap. If I stopped moving even for a moment, the cadence would take me. Exhaustion screamed through my body. Muscles shook. Thoughts blurred. I forced myself to move faster, then slower, then erratic. The lights flickered. The darkness recoiled slightly. I laughed breathlessly. Chaos still mattered. The victory was fleeting. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. For one terrible second, I lay still. The darkness surged. I rolled and screamed, smashing a lamp against the wall. Glass exploded. Light flared. The darkness retreated again. I lay among shards, bleeding and laughing. I had learned the final rule. As long as I refused to be still, the darkness could not claim me. The city outside fell silent, waiting, watching, and learning how to stop. I did not sleep. Sleep required stillness, and stillness was surrender. The city outside my window had become a held breath. No cars moved. No sirens cried. Even the wind seemed to pause between gusts. Millions of people stood or sat or lay awake, waiting without knowing what for. The darkness no longer hid. It did not need to. It filled every gap between moments. I moved constantly, pacing, stretching, knocking over furniture, singing off-key, anything to break rhythm. My body screamed for rest, but I refused it. I understood now what the darkness truly was. Not a creature, not a force. A rule: where there is waiting, it arrives. Where there is silence, it grows. Where there is stillness, it feeds. The countdown had only been a language to teach that rule. I turned on the television. Every channel showed the same image. A live feed of city streets around the world. People waiting, standing perfectly still. I shouted at the screen, "Move!" No one did. My phone lit up with one final message. "This ends now." I knew what it meant. The darkness was tired of patience. It wanted conclusion. I made my choice. I opened my front door and stepped into the hallway. Every apartment door on the floor opened at the same time. People stood in their doorways, unmoving, eyes unfocused. I ran. The stairwell echoed with my footsteps, loud and uneven. Below me, the building groaned, as if protesting motion itself. I burst into the street. The world watched. Cameras turned. Screens followed. I waved my arms and screamed nonsense. I danced. I tripped. I laughed. I cried. The darkness recoiled visibly. Lights flickered wildly across the city. I felt it strain. It could not tolerate chaos at this scale. I ran until my lungs burned. Behind me, the city stirred. One person stepped forward, then another. Movement spread like fire. The darkness screamed without sound. I collapsed in the middle of the street, shaking. Around me, people moved uncertainly, then faster. Cars started. Voices rose. The spell broke. Above us, the sky seemed to breathe again. The darkness retreated, not destroyed, but wounded. I lay there, smiling through tears, knowing the truth. It would return someday, in quiet rooms, in waiting lines, in sleepless nights. But now the world remembered how to fight. Never stop moving. Never stop choosing. Never wait in the dark. And if you ever hear a voice begin to count, Run! The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next stories.